In this module, we'll be learning all about the MetaHuman creator itself, and more specifically, the user interface and navigation. Starting up the MetaHuman creator for the first time can be a lengthy process, but hang tight, go make a cup of coffee, and before you know it, you'll be ready to go. So once the MetaHuman creator is ready, you should find yourself at this screen right here where we have the Create MetaHuman tab up top. And here on the left-hand side, you'll have a list of all the MetaHuman presets and starting points you can choose to start creating your own MetaHuman. So the list of presets here is always growing. There are way more MetaHumans available now than there were when MetaHumans were first released. So feel free to use any of these as a starting point. By clicking on any one of them here, you'll then load up your selected MetaHuman in the main window. Now, it's worth keeping in mind that the MetaHuman presets that have the little exclamation mark right here, that means that those characters use assets such as hairstyles or beards that are currently in development, which will only be displayed at LOD 0 and LOD 1. Usually, this means that these characters are using hair grooms that don't have hair cards for the higher LODs yet. So when you're ready, click on the next button at the bottom, and here we are in the MetaHuman creator. So the first thing we're going to talk about is navigation and how to control the camera. You'll see here on the right-hand side, we have hotkey reference with all the keyboard shortcuts you may need for navigating the viewport. If you don't see the hotkey reference, you can click on the little keyboard button up here to toggle it on or off. I like having them up personally because sometimes I have the memory of a goldfish and I'm trying to remember a specific shortcut. This is here to help you. So by clicking and holding the right mouse button, we can now rotate the camera around our character like so. To pan the camera up and down, we can hold the middle mouse button like this. And in order to pan the camera around in all axes, we can press Alt, middle mouse button, and we can pan our camera like so. Now you have two ways to zoom in and out. We can either use the scroll wheel to zoom in or out, or you can hold Alt and right mouse button, like this. So for those of you who come from Maya, you'll feel right at home. We also have shortcuts for the face, body, torso, legs, feet, and the far camera. So by holding the 1 key, it'll zoom to your face. 2 will zoom to the whole body. 3 will zoom onto the torso. 4 will zoom onto the legs. 5 on the feet. And 6 will give you a more distant camera. So with these tips, you should be able to navigate around your character a little bit more easily. So now let's move on to the buttons on the top of our viewport up here. You'll see we have the big studio button. This here allows us to change the HDRI or the surrounding environment our MetaHuman finds himself in. So by clicking on this, let's switch it to indoor right here. Now you'll see everything kind of changed. We have an indoor environment, and the lighting on our MetaHuman has changed considerably. This is very useful for just getting a different preview of the lighting on your character because people look very different in various lighting situations. So it's nice to just get a little change of pace, just preview a different lighting scenario on your character to get a better idea of what you're doing and what you're looking at. We also have the outdoor environment as well, which again is a great way to just visualize things a little differently. And lastly, we have the silhouette option, which may seem a little bit weird, but it is very useful to be able to see a clear silhouette of our character, especially when we start sculpting the shape of their face. So I'm going to switch it back to Studio because it's the one I think looks the best, because we got some nice shadows here. And let's move on to the quality settings. Right here, where it says medium by default, we can select the render quality. So by clicking on this, I'm going to switch this to Epic Ray Trace. And you might not think that things look very different, but let's go to the exterior environment and I'll show you exactly how different things look. If we switch this to medium again, notice we'd lose all the shadowing around the lips and on the eyes. By switching into Epic Ray Traced, we get some much better shadowing going on here. The results look much more realistic. Next up, we have the LOD settings. So this right here is LOD 0, where we have a maximum amount of polygons, a maximum amount of detail, texture resolutions, and hair groom. So you'll notice in the hair we get all this nice fine detail. That's because LOD0 and LOD1 use hair grooms and not hair cards like we're used to seeing in games. So by clicking on the LOD button here, we can choose the LOD that we want. So by switching from LOD0 to LOD1, there is a bit of a difference in the hair groom. You'll see that the hair strands are a little bit more polygonal. Switching to LOD2 here is when things start changing a lot. Now we no longer have hair grooms. The textures are still pretty good, but you can tell there is a substantial drop in quality, especially around the hair and the beard here. LOD3 starts bringing things even lower quality. 4, 5, and this is where things really start not looking so good. But of course, LOD4, 5, and 6, and 7 are not intended for close-up viewing. They're meant to be viewed from quite a substantial distance. And when you go to LOD6 and 7, things start looking a little bit ridiculous. But this is by design. This is entirely intentional. So switching back to LOD1 here, this is a lot better and much more appealing to work with. In general, when we're going to be working with all the face, hair, and body settings, you don't really want to be working at an LOD higher than 1 or 2. Next up here, we have the Toggle Clay Material button right here. So when we click on this, it's going to preview just a clay shader, just a regular default Lambert gray material. This is very useful for giving you a better preview of the wrinkles and fine skin detail. The shortcut for this is C, as we can see right here. No pun intended. And now at the bottom of our viewport is where we have a whole bunch more settings. Now at the bottom here, we have the preview button selected, which does, as you would expect, it previews your character. But we have blend, move, and sculpt, and these are the tools that we'll be looking into in the next modules. So by clicking on the blend tool right here, you'll see we have a new sidebar showing up with a whole bunch more settings, which we'll get into later. Same thing with the move tool, which we have different overlays on our character. And lastly, the sculpt tool, which again gives us more control over the shape of our face. So going back to preview and Xing this out, you'll see we have one more thing to look at right here. And so by clicking the play button, you can play an animation sequence to see how your MetaHuman looks when it is animated. You can stop this animation at any time by clicking the big square stop button right here. And when you do so, your character will revert to a default idle pose and won't be moving at all. That said, you can change the animation type by clicking on the button right here. Opening this, we have idle, face ROM, and body technical ROM. ROM standing for range of motion. So it's going to exaggerate facial animations just to see how the skin and face will deform with facial expressions. So this is a really great way to kind of see if your character is holding up depending on how you've sculpted it or how you've gotten it to look. Switching to the body technical range of motion, you'll see it now that they're doing a few more different poses, a bit more natural, and you'll get a much better idea of how your MetaHuman will deform in engine. So now that we've established the core basics of the MetaHuman creator, we are now ready to start delving into the more advanced tools which will help you customize your MetaHuman more easily and efficiently.